It's Parshas, the Parshas Savo. Also, I want to discuss Rosh Hashanah a little bit. So there are many questions. One question, the more Rosh Hashanah oriented, but technically, halachically, we only need 60 kolos, 60 sounds of the shofar. But our custom is to do 100 kolos. And the reason is because the Yerushalmi mentions that the mother of Sisera was the general who tried to destroy the Jewish people. And of course, he met his downfall and he was killed. But the mother of Sisera, when it dawned upon her that her son was defeated and that her son will not be returning, so the Medrash says she did 100 kolos. She cried 100 cries. And corresponding with the 100 cries that Aim Sisera cried, we do 100 kolos in the shofar. It's very strange, extremely strange. The Aim Sisera, the mother of an anti-Semite, one of the leading anti-Semites of Jewish history. So we use her as a source for the custom to blow 100 kolos of the shofar. We have to understand that. And also, in the Tochacha, which is at the end of this week's Sedra, so in the Tochacha, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mentioned, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Shem Havaya, is mentioned 26 times. And the Baal Turim points out that in Shemona Esrei, that's not true actually according to our Nusach, but according to the Nusach of the Rambam, it is true. The Shem Havaya, the name of God, the special name of God, is mentioned also 26 times. And the Chachamim instituted, when they formulated the text of the Shemona Esrei, of the Tefillah, of the prayer, that we should, the 26 times that the name of God is mentioned in the prayers, should overcome the effect of the 26 times that God's name is mentioned in the Tochacha, in the curses that will overtake the Jewish people in the future if they do not follow the Torah. That's very strange. Many ask against it, and I'm going to try to suggest a possible explanation. Now, also, the Tochacha is that there are two Tochachas. I've discussed this many times. One is in Bechukosai, and one is here in Savo. In Bechukosai, we always do it 2 Shabbosim before Shavuos, and in Savo, we do it 2 Shabbosim before Rosh Hashanah. And the way Tosfos explains it, because the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah is associated with Rosh Hashanah, and we don't want the, as the Gemara says, the curses to be associated with the new year. So consequently, the curses of the Tochacha is mentioned, is read 2 Shabbosim before Rosh Hashanah. But the halacha is that during we do not have, in the middle of the Tochacha and Aliyah, no one is called up in the middle of the Tochacha. Our custom is that they're called up a couple psukim before the Tochacha, and they finish their Aliyah a couple psukim after the Tochacha. But there cannot be any stops, any Aliyah in the middle of the Tochacha. And the question is, why can't there be an aliyah in the middle of the Tochacha? Why can't we divide the Tochacha into different aliyahs? And the Gemara mentions two different opinions. One opinion is Musar Hashem al timas val toketz b'tochachaso. When God chastises us, we should not show disgust. In other words, when a person, if you would divide the Tochacha, it's like saying, I can't take this anymore. I don't want to hear it anymore. So we don't make a stop in the Tochacha. Yes, we have a lot of trouble about it, but Musar Hashem al timas. We have to listen to the Musar, to the chastising of God. And Baal Tochacha b'tochachasa, when he chastises us, we can't, the way the drush is, we can't divide it up into small pieces. There's a discussion, Rashi and Tosfos there. Okay. Then with Masechah Sofrim, then another reason is given because we don't want to make a bracha on perennials, on tragedy. We do not want to associate a bracha on tragedy. So consequently, if we would have a new aliyah in the middle of the Tochacha, we would make a bracha on the tragedies that are mentioned, the curses that will take place to the Jewish people later on. So we don't want the bracha to be associated with those psukim. So we make the bracha a couple psukim afterwards and a couple psukim beforehand and a couple psukim afterwards. So the bracha shouldn't, and certainly we can't make a bracha in the middle because we don't want the bracha to be associated with these curses. Now we have to understand both explanations. Now, I've mentioned in the past, I'm not going to go into the details because time is short and it's late. But my uncle mentioned explaining the custom of standing for the Aseret Dibros. Even those who do not stand for the rest of Kriyas Torah, there is a Ashkenazi custom is to stand for the Aseret Dibros. Why do we stand for the Aseret Dibros? Because whereas the rest of the Torah is to be understood from the perspective of learning, of studying, of Talmud Torah, the Aseret Dibros should be seen not just as an act of learning, but it's an act of experiencing. We're experiencing Matan Torah. We're experiencing the presence of God. We are experiencing revelation. And when we are experiencing revelation, when we experience the presence of God, so then, of course, we stand. So, in a sense, so the Aseret Dibros is not just studying, but it's experiencing. And I want to suggest that to a certain degree, the Tochacha, the curses that are mentioned at the end of this week's Sedra, is also a form of experiencing. And that's what it means. Musar Hashem al timas. In other words, there are two approaches to the Tochacha. We could say that we're studying the Tochacha, like we study other psukim in the Torah. And when we study from the perspective of studying, so we want to make a stop, we want to concentrate, to think it over. But when there's chastising, when God is talking to us, and God not just teaching us, but he's chastising us, you don't stop in the middle, because that takes away from the experience of the God, the Musar that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us. So I think that this is when we make a stop, we're saying, I don't want the Musar. Yeah, I'll study it. I'll look it over what you said. I'll think about it. But no, this has to be experiencing the chastising of God. And in order to experience it as the act of God's chastising, actually, it's Moshe giving over what's going to happen. So we have to experience that hearing. So Musar Hashem al Timas. So the Musar that the Moshe gave over by custom, it applies to this week's Sedra also. So we have to see it not just as studying, but as experiencing. If we experience it as chastising, to divide it up into small pieces, into small portions, takes away from the experiential effect. And as far but then the question arises, why is it that if we're experiencing, so in this week's Sedra, you could say it's Moshe who's saying it over, but in certainly in Bikul Kosai, there it's God. It's said in God's name that God is saying the chastising, and we treat this week's Sedra like that Sedra also. So, but why don't we stand? After all, Musar Hashem al Timas. We have to have that experience of hearing the chastising. But I think we could suggest. Now, I have mentioned very often the Palgei Mayim. That's the parish of the Nesivos on Eicha. The Palgei Mayim says, in Eicha it says that Lo mipi elyon teitze haros v'hatov, not from the mouth of a pie, not from the mouth of God, is the good, is the haros, the bad in the plural form, and the good in the singular form said. Now, what does that mean? In other words, it means that man has free choice. God doesn't dictate to us whether to be bad or good. Salomi Piel Yon, God did not take away our freedom of will. If we acted bad, then it was our choice. And if we acted good, it was our choice. But the Palgei Mayim asks the question, why is it when it comes to acting bad, we say not from the mouth of God, does the bad in the plural, haraos in the plural form, not from the mouth of God does the many bads come out, and not from the mouth of God does the good come out. Why is it that when we talk about good, we talk in the singular form, and when we talk about the bad that took place, we talk in the plural form? And the Palgei Mayim says a very interesting thought. Tell you, if I said it myself, I would be called an apikoros. The Palgei Mayim says that there's two goods and two bads. The two goods is the good that we do, and we do that by freedom of choice, and the good that takes place for us as a result of the good that we did. So, and then when the bad, it's in a plural form, we have the bad that we did, that we chose to do, and the bad that happened to us as a result of the bad that we did. So when it comes to good, God, it was by our choice that we did good. So it wasn't God who forced us to do good. He might have commanded us to do good, but he didn't make us do good. We chose to do good. But the reward that we get, that is something that God very often does. The good that happens is from God. So lo mi piel yon teitse hatov. Not from God does the good that we choose to do come from God, because we chose to do it. But the good that comes as a result of the good that we did, that came from God. But when it comes to the roast, when it comes to the bad things, on one hand, God did not force us to do bad. We chose to do bad. But what's interesting is the bad that happens to us because of the bad that we did, to a large degree, it's not that God brings that bad on us, but to a certain degree, God withdraws. God doesn't interfere. And we are left in the mercy of nature. And there is all kinds of nature. There is physical nature. There is human nature. And we know the disposition of new human nature is hatred against the Jewish people. Halacha she'esav shonei liYaakov. And one does not have to be a London to know that. You just have to see what's going on in the world today. You have to open your eyes. You have to open up your mind. You have to be willing to confront reality, which many are not ready to do today, we see. Like the Torah tells us, it took 40 years for the Jewish people in the desert to have lev ladas, a heart or a brain to understand, and eyes to see, to recognize what is taking place. Sometimes people are in denial. So the God, but when it comes to the bad, God leaves it up. When we chose to do bad, God didn't force us to do bad, but the bad that happens to us as a result of the bad that we did, that also God doesn't do, but God withdraws. God doesn't interfere sometimes. In a limited way, God doesn't interfere. Salomi pielyon teitse haros, not from the mouth of God does the bad happen, not the bad that we did and not the bad that happens to us. But what happened? God didn't interfere. We say in the Haggadah, "B'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalosenu." In every generation, the enemies of the Jewish people stand up to try to destroy them. And God interferes, on the basis of human nature throughout the history of the world. These nations that arose to destroy the Jewish people probably had the ability very often to do that, in their minds, to accomplish that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu interfered. And sometimes, some generations, he interferes more. And sometimes, some generations, he interferes less. But it's not him that brings it about. It's the nature of the world and God not interfering that brings these tragedies upon us. And in a sense, the Nefesh HaChaim, very interesting, the Palgei Mayim could be understood with the Nefesh HaChaim. He says, Nefesh HaChaim says, God gives man the ability. Of course, God is all powerful. He doesn't need strength. But God figuratively gives man the ability to tie his hands, gives the Jew the ability to tie the hands of God. When we do not act properly, God allows us to tie his hands, in a sense, to make him weaker. Not really, but perceptually. And when we act properly, and we do the mitzvahs of the Torah, so on the contrary, then we are giving HaKadosh Baruch Hu strength. And this is the same explanation that the Palgemayim is saying. So we could understand that this is the idea of not making a bracha on pranios, on tragedy, on the klolos, because bracha, Reb Chaim Volozhiner in the Nefesh HaChaim says, bracha means tosfos koach, additional strength. But when it comes to the additional strength, the strength that we have, when it comes with the strength that we give God, a bracha is indicative. God gave the Jew, the ability to strengthen his hands, and figuratively, God gave the Jew the ability to strengthen him, and at the same time, figuratively, God gave Jew the power to weaken him when he does not act in a proper way. So this is the idea of bracha. We do not want to associate the klolos, the curses, with bracha, with the strength of God, because the klolos take effect, not because God, even though the psukim might indicate that way, the klolos take effect not because God does something against the Jewish people, but God withdraws. And then very often the klolos take place as a result of the tragedies, as a result of nature, whether it's human nature, physical nature, whatever it is, it takes place as a result of nature. So now, many years ago, my wife and myself, we went to Eretz Yisrael, and we stopped off. In Amsterdam. We had to wait for another plane, so we went into Amsterdam, and I bumped into a Jewish fellow there. He recognized that I was Jewish, and he started talking to me. We got into a discussion, and I asked him, "What does your father do for a living?" And he said to me, "My father is a shomer." Okay, in the Gemara we talk about shomrim, the Torah we talk about shomrim, to watch my animals, to watch my objects. I didn't understand what he meant. I thought maybe he meant that his father was a policeman. So I asked him, "Your father works for the police department?" He says, "No, he's a shomer kashrus." I assumed what he meant was that his father was what we call in America a mashgiach. But I was intrigued about the two different expressions of regarding somebody who watches the kashrus of an object. On one hand, wherever this person came from in Amsterdam or wherever it was, the mashgiach was called a shomer. And we call a mashgiach. I was trying to think, what's the difference between a shomer and a mashgiach? A mashgiach watches. A shomer implies more than just watching. A shomer implies responsibility. He's not just watching. There are mashgichim that they watch and they give a report. Is it kosher or it's not kosher? They perhaps do not have the responsibility to make sure that it's kosher. They just have to disclose and reveal whether it's kosher. But if someone is a shomer, he might have a responsibility. Yeah, we talk about God. On one hand, we talk about God being a shomer Yisrael, shomer sheres Yisrael. On the other hand, we talk about God being mashgiach min hachalonos. He looks from out the windows. There are times in history where mainly we perceive God as being the shomer Yisrael. And there are times in history, as a result, he's only mashgiach min hachalonos. He looks, he ascertains, he evaluates, he perpetuates the covenant. But he doesn't interfere to the same degree that he did in the full capacity of the Shomer Yisrael when he comes a Mashgiach and Ben Achalonos. The destiny of Klal Yisrael is being preserved, but we encounter many difficulties contemporarily. And I think that this is the idea. This is the idea of this is the idea that we want, that there's times when we feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu is at a distance from us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's because we went away from him. Could be as a result, he moved further away from us. It was initiated by us moving away from him. But as a result, he also moved a little bit away. And what is the idea of Shofar? Rosh Hashanah is the first of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. Now, Yom Kippur, I always mention, Yom Kippur is... Yom Kippur, we know how it's days of Tshuva, the final day of Tshuva, of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. We fast, we say vidui, we cry. But Rosh Hashanah, according to the Gra, you're not allowed to cry. According to Moshitis, you do not say vidui. The Ari says a short vidui. So how does Rosh Hashanah, the first of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, manifest itself as a day of Tshuva? But a Jew who sinned, to a certain degree, he rejected Matan Torah. He rejected not only the Torah, but he rejected the experience of Matan Torah. We say, Ilu Kervanu Lifnei Har Sinai. I always mention, if God brought us close at Mount Sinai, Lo Nasan Lana Torah Dayenu, that would have been great. What would have been so great? I always say, if all the Mefarshim ask this question, I shouldn't say I say, all the Mefarshim, all the commentaries ask, Ilu Kirvanu Lifnei Har Sinai, what would have been so great in coming close to Mount Sinai, not getting the Torah? But the answer is, Kirvanu means brought us close to him. At Mount Sinai, there was revelation. The Jew saw that he was close to God. God came close to the Jew. And the Jew came close to God. There was a certain closeness. That was the experience of Sinai. Ilu Kirvanov Neistos, that in itself would have been a great experience. And the idea of Shofar, what is Shofar? Now, Shofar is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the time of Matan Torah, he made himself known. Uvekol shofar hafata. He made his presence known to the Jewish people with the sound of the shofar. The shofar is the experience of Har Sinai, of feeling close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Rosh Hashanah is dedicated to that experience of re-experiencing Maimon Har Sinai, of sensing the closeness to God, of perpetuating that experience. But we have to perpetuate that experience. And when we blow the shofar, we re-experience Har Sinai over Kol Shofar Hafata, a feeling the closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's very interesting. Chazal say, we technically, in theory, Midiaraisa, okay, it's because of Sveikas, doubts, whatever it is, all we need is 30 sounds of the shofar. But halachically, the custom is 100 sounds. But halachically, we have 60 sounds because we do 30, what's called Kiyos de Miyushav, right? After Kriyas Torah, we do 30. And then we do 30 in the Chazaras Hashatz, in the Tefillah. And why do we do 30 extra with the 30? Why do we do the 30 in the Kios, the Miyushav? The first 30, we're going to hear 30 anyway in the Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara says, La'arve v'sa satan, to confuse the satan. Okay. I'm sure people don't think of a red devil with horns on top, with a pitchfork in his hand. But obviously, this couldn't mean something of that nature. But what is it? I want to suggest, I know it's different than what most people say, that La'arve v'sa satan, the Chazal tell us who is the Satan. The Satan is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclinations of man. The Satan is the also Malach HaMavis, but it's the evil inclinations of man. What's the idea behind it? Now, shofar, the sounds of the shofar, we say it in the middle of the Chazaras Hashatz. Why? Because the sounds of the shofar, my uncle mentions this at length, that the sounds of the shofar, they are a form of tefillah. It's a form of davening. It's a form of davening. You see sounds of the shofar right before we say Tiskabel Salosan. Accept our tefillahs. And then we say Tiskabel Salosan. The sounds of the shofar are not just something we do at the time of the davening, but it's part of the davening also. It's part of the davening. It's the crying of the davening. So so when we sound the shofar, the question is, who are we blowing the shofar to? Are we blowing the shofar to God? And if we say it's davening, we're blowing it to God. On the other hand, when it comes to the bracha of shofar, we say lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. So the mitzvah is not to blow the shofar to God. The mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar. It would seem that we're blowing the shofar to ourselves. But on the other hand, Chazal tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, blow before me the shofar, and I will remember the schus of the Akedah for you. So there seems to be a contradiction. Are we blowing the shofar as the target of the shofar sound? HaKadosh Baruch Hu? God? Is it a form of tefillah? Or are we blowing it to ourselves? Are we blowing it for us to hear? And I think the idea of shofar, what is tefillah? The essence of tefillah is is Omed Lifnei Hashchina. You're standing before God. Reb Chaim says that that's not just a halach in tefillah. That's part of the definition of tefillah. You're standing before God. You're blowing the shofar to God. Because if shofar is a tefillah, you're blowing the shofar to God. You daven to God. You pray to God, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, but tefillah necessitates it necessitates the idea of being close to God. Uvekol shofar hafata. We're trying, when we sinned, we distanced ourselves from God. And we're trying to become close again, to come close again to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So so this is the idea. The idea is it's not enough. It's not enough for us to send the message to God. Sometimes we have to listen to the message that we're saying to God. Yes, shofar is a message to God. It's davening to God. It's crying out to God. It's asking God to remember the Akedah. It's asking God many things. But sometimes we just say something to God, but we don't really listen ourselves to what we're saying to God. So the mitzvah of shofar is to blow the sound of the shofar and to listen to the message that we are telling God, to listen ourselves to that message. It's very interesting. If you take a look in the Haggadah, let me see what time it is. When you take a look at the Haggadah on Pesach, you have there the Parsha Bikurim, which is part of this week's Sedra, that when a Jew brings the first fruit to Jerusalem, he talks about how the enemies of the Jewish people attacked them, even early in their history. Lavan, the father-in-law of Yaakov. And then as a result, the Jewish people went down to Egypt. And they were in bondage in Egypt. After they became a big nation, they were in bondage in Egypt. Their children were killed in Egypt. And then when does the tide change? Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei. We cried out to God, Vayishma Hashem es Kalenu, Vayaras Anyenu Be'esamalenu Be'eslachtzenu. According to the Sifri, and this is also said in the Haggadah, when did the Jewish people cry out to God? Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Avoseinu. That was when Vayomas Melech Mitzrayim, when the king of Egypt died. Vayanchu b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people couldn't bear it anymore after Paro died. And everybody asked the question, Paro dies, so because of that, the Jews can't bear it. Their oppressor dies. Okay, their situation didn't change, but why should that be worse? But I think the Jewish people at that time were making the same mistake that many Jews today are making. They thought the Egyptians loved them. After all, they remembered that Yosef, who saved them. There was one wicked Paro who didn't know Yosef. But once this Paro will die, then the Egyptians who really love us will return us to our position of glory. And so long as there was light in their mind at the end of the tunnel, they didn't turn to God. They only turned to God as a last resort. What was the mistake? The mistake we make. There are fools, stupid people who don't who don't want to have lev ladas. They don't want to confront reality. And they start making differences. And they'll say, it's Hamas, but the people of Gaza, those who accompanied the Hamas when they put children in the ovens, those who accompanied Hamas when they raped Jewish women, those who made a parade when they were dragging the half-dead bodies of the Jews in the streets, they're not so bad. We can make peace with them. They don't understand that these people empowered Hamas. And then there are those who say the West Bank. And statistics have shown that the people on the West Bank are more supportive of Hamas than the people in Gaza war in the days. I'm not talking when their buildings are falling apart now, but in the days before the war, when the people of Gaza supported Hamas also, the people in the West Bank had a stronger commitment, had a better attitude to Hamas, or a worse attitude from our perspective, than the Egyptians, than the Arabs in Gaza. So and because of this, there are people that go around, and even Jews. There are Jews that say that the West Bank, they put out papers. Oh, we're not treating the people of the West Bank properly. We're not treating the people in Gaza properly. Besides the fact that they ignored the fact that these people are not getting the food that is being sent anyway. That the food is used for the soldiers of Hamas, for the families of the soldiers, and it's used for selling, to make money, to buy weapons, to kill more Jews. And they ignore the fact that the people, those who don't pay that money, are not going to get the food because Hamas takes all the food. They're ignoring that they don't have lev ladas because they don't want to have lev ladas. Someone even suggested on the internet that Israel has the capability of going into Gaza and making sure that the food is distributed to the food is distributed to the that the food is distributed to that the food is distributed to the civilians. So let's understand this. Israel should send its troops in to distribute food, to endanger their troops, because the soldiers of Hamas will not give food to their people. What is it Israel's obligation? Starvation. Well, as someone said, there are people in Africa that are starving. But even that's not an answer. What about the Jewish soldiers that are out in the sun? If you want to give money to help the people that are trying to save Jewish lives. So the the but the all right. So I think this is the so the so as long the so the idea of tefillah. So the Jewish people, when did the Jewish people, when the Jewish people realized there is no way out, so then they turned to God. And immediately, if we look in the Haggadah, it's in this week's said, Nitzak al Shem Kevasenu, by Yishma Hashem es Kolenu, God heard our voices. By Yar Sanyenu Samlenu Satseni, he saw the tragic circumstances. By Yotzena Hashem Mitzrayim. That's when the Exodus begins. God answers our tefillas. The Jewish people did not feel close to God. They felt close to the Egyptians. And they saw their salvation coming from the Egyptians. But when they davening is omed lefnei hashchina. They were then manipulating that they were trying to get rid of the distance that separated them from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the essence of tefillah. And that's the essence of the Kol HaShofar also, to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, when the Kadosh Baruch Hu is a mashgiach mibein hachalonos. In a sense, God is hiding, but he's still concerned about the Jewish people. So he's looking out of a window figuratively. But there are times when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a full Shomer Yisrael. He is there protecting us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam in the most complete sense. And tefillah brings us close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I think in the Tochacha, the tragedies happened because we removed ourselves from God, and God, as a result of our moving ourselves away from Him, moved further away in the other direction as well. That's the Yud Kei Vav Kei in the Tochacha. But the Yud Kei Vav Kei in the Shemona Esrei, the Yud Kei Vav Kei in the Shemona Esrei, that's on the contrary, closeness to God, to Tefillah, being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's why the 26 times in the Rambam's Girsa text of the Shemona Esrei, the Yud Kei Vav Kei is mentioned 26 times. Habaya, that's God involvement in this world. Whereas the 26 times in the Tochacha, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu moving, in a sense, hiding. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in this world, but he is just letting nature take over to a certain degree. That's the pshat you could say in the Baal HaTurim. And I think, but we have to understand, when we hear the sound of the shofar, so the sound of the shofar, what is the message to God? There are many messages I mentioned. There's the message of the Akedah, of Avraham Avinu taking Yitzhak, of Mesiras Nefesh. And I think the Mesiras Nefesh of Yitzhak Avinu, is something that was, I've mentioned many times, that was given out through the generations. Those soldiers in Eretz Yisrael, those soldiers who went into Gaza, that go into Lebanon, that went into Syria, defending the lives of the Jewish people. They have the strength of Yitzhak Avinu. They got their strength from Yitzhak Avinu. And when we blow the shofar, We're reminding HaKadosh Baruch Hu not just about Yitzchak Avinu, but throughout the generations, those who gave their lives on Kiddush Hashem, and especially in our generation, the soldiers in Israel, who are giving their lives on a daily basis. And people shouldn't think that because they're not in Gaza, they're safe. You saw what happened today when the friendly ones, the friendly enemies from the West Bank, went to a Haredi area and killed, at the last I heard, 6 people and injured 20. And if not for the fact that some Haredim now went into the army and had a gun, many more would have been killed. And then, but I think the message of the Shofar, of course, the closeness to God I mentioned, but the message of the Shofar has another message. I mentioned our minhag is that we blow 100 kolos because the mother of Sisera cried 100 cries when she thought her son, and it was true, might not come back. Her son was killed. The great general, the warrior, the one who had so many victories, who took so much booty from all his conquests, and all of a sudden he was killed by a Jewish lady. And so she cried 100 times. And because of that, we blow the shofar 100 times. How are we to understand it? But I'll tell you how we understand it. I'm going to suggest a pshat that perhaps previous generations were not able to understand as well. Whenever an Arab is killed, the New York Times and the other papers that at one time claimed to be newspapers, they would put on the front page a picture of a grieving Arab mother. Oh, the Palestinians are great at public relations. Pictures are always there. They'll have a picture of a starving child who's actually in Italy. And many people are just awed by it. Even Jews, rabbis, are stupid enough to believe it. I have my explanation of it. Why they're so stupid. Some is because they want the publicity. They want to be considered important. And today, when you take the sides of the non-Jews against the Jews, when you criticize the Jewish army, you become important. It comes from a bad self-perception of the Jewish people. But I think there's another reason. So people cry together with the mother of the murderers that were killed. And the press puts the pictures out. But it's very rare in the secular press that when a Jewish child is killed, that you'll see the picture by terrorists, that the picture of the Jewish mother cries. One would think that Jewish mothers don't cry over their children that were murdered. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the world might listen, Tame Sisera, to the crying of the mother of Sisera, to the mothers of Hamas Yamach Shemam. But there is someone that will listen to your cries. And that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. We blow the shofar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's important for us to listen to the message of the shofar also. It's not enough for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to hear the cries of the Jewish mothers whose children were killed. It's important for the Jewish people to hear it. Unfortunately, 80 rabbis, they might blow the shofar, the sound of the Jewish mothers, but they're listening not to the sound of the Jewish mothers, but they're listening to the sound of the fake sounds of the mothers who later on celebrate. The Palestinian mothers whose children were killed because they, as a people, they encourage their children to go into Hamas territory. They're bringing up their children. How do they study mathematics in the Arab schools, which is supported by the UN? If the Hamas soldiers kill there are 5 Jewish soldiers and Hamas kills 3 of them, how many more are left to kill? So we have to know. We blow the shofar. The shofar is the sound. We blow the shofar to God. It's the cry of the Jewish mothers, of the Jewish parents, of the Jewish children who became orphans. But it's not enough to blow the sound to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to listen to also the mitzvah lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. Let's hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will certainly hear our tefillos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will certainly hear the kol hashofar. But let's hope that those who don't want to lev ladas and nayim liros, as nayim lishmoa. Let's hope that they too, with the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and maybe could start a little earlier in these days of Elul, that they too will listen to the Kol HaShofar and to hear the sounds of the Jewish people who are crying, the orphans, the wives, the parents. Let's hope that the sound of the shofar will be the sound of Kabbalah Shofar Gadol L'Chayruseinu.
Amen. If anyone has any questions, please put it in the chat.